71 years on this earth taught me a hard rule. You can lose your wife, your keys, and your balance, but you never let anyone take your name. I said that out loud to the empty kitchen as the oven timer pinged. Easter Sunday. Honey-baked hams shining like church glass. Deviled eggs lined up with a dusting of paprika the way Layla liked. Her Waterford crystal catching the late light. I'd ironed the linen runner, set 3 plates, even reheated the rolls in foil so they'd sweat like little clouds. Sinatra rustled from my old Bluetooth speaker. The mantel clock kept steady time. Tick, 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 like a polite metronome for an old man's patience. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Calvin had texted, "Dad, we're on our way. Around noon." Jessa added a heart. I looked out past the kitchen window at the cedar bird feeder Layla, and I hung the summer before the cancer. Finches jittered on the rim, scattering seed like confetti. They'll be here, I told the feeder, like it cared. Doorbell. Finally, I wiped my hands, straightened my shirt, and opened the door to a kid in a ball cap holding a clipboard and a padded envelope. For Bruce Dalton? That's me. He wouldn't meet my eyes, just have me sign. The envelope smelled like copier ink in somebody else's kitchen. Inside was a stiff cream card. Jessa's handwriting, looped and perky. Bruce, we're spending Easter with my mom. She hasn't been well. Hope you understand. We'll stop by next week to help you get your paperwork in order. XOJ. Paperwork. I stood in the doorway while the oven clicked and the house breathed. Through the bare maple branches, I could see my reflection in the storm glass. A tall, stubborn man my barber still calls Colonel, shoulders squared out of habit. I set the card on the hall table like it might burn, then did what any foolish father does. I checked Instagram. There they were, Calvin and Jessa at a table crowded with smiling strangers. Ham that wasn't mine, lilies that weren't from my yard. Hashtag family first. The mantel clock kept talking. Tick, tick, tick. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a mower started up, the kind of flat Sunday drone that makes a man's heart feel parked. I slid my phone in my pocket, turned Sinatra down, and lifted Layla's crystal. She'd hated smudges. I polished anyway, because that's what you do when you can't fix what's broken. You shine what's left. I texted Calvin a lie. No worries. Tell her Happy Easter. Then, before I could draft something righteous or weak, I powered the phone down and set on the charger like confession. I plated the ham for one. The first bite was too sweet. I chewed like a soldier eats in the rain, efficient, dignified, nobody watching. When I'd finished, I put everything away in glass containers with blue lids. Order in little squares. I stacked 2 plates back in the cabinet and left one on the counter, because Layla always said a kitchen should look lived in, not staged. You want to know what anger sounds like at my age? It isn't shouting. It's the hush when you choose not to call. It's the slow, careful way you fold a note and slide it into a junk drawer. It's the soft thud of a closet door where your suit hangs ready, just in case someone decides you need paperwork, help. Outside, evening cooled the yard of the color of old nickels. The bird feeder swung and tapped the window, once, twice, like a knuckle. I watched it rock on its wire, cedar against glass, tiny hearts flitting and pecking like they had an appointment I'd forgotten. Layla, I said to nobody, I am not a man you put in a box. The clock ticked. The feeder tapped again, a small, patient sound, like someone trying to get my attention from the other side of the pane. And that's when I realized tomorrow would not be about forgiveness. It would start with a knock I couldn't ignore. The next morning, I brewed coffee the way Layla liked it, strong enough to stand a spoon upright, dark as midnight highway. Sunlight caught on the feeder outside, and for the first time in months, I noticed it wasn't just decoration. It was an invitation. Something tugged at me, like a whisper under the ticking clock. I stepped out barefoot, mug in hand, breath ghosting in the cool Tahoe air. The cedar box swayed on its hook. When I tapped the side, seed rattled. Then my fingers brushed something wedged in the slat, an envelope, weathered, corners chewed by time. My name in her hand. Bruce, it said. I leaned on the railing to steady myself. She'd been gone 7 months, yet here she was, voice pressed into paper. I unfolded it slowly, like scripture. If you're reading this, I couldn't tell you in person. I wanted you to have a place that's only yours. Look for the small key in my desk drawer, bottom left. It belongs to the cabin at Tahoe. Title's in your name. And the trust, well, you'll see. Just promise me. Live, Bruce. Don't let anyone decide for you. I read it twice, then a third time, the words filling the silence Layla used to own. My hands shook, but not from age. From possibility. The cabin. She'd thought ahead. She'd know me better than I knew myself. I tore through her old roll-top desk, pulling open the stiff drawer. There was a brass key, warm from memory. Beside it, another folded page. Paperwork isn't always an enemy, my love. Sometimes it's a shield. That line hit me in the ribs, because yesterday Jessa had promised to help with paperwork, like a wolf offering to tidy the henhouse. I pocketed the key, grabbed my jacket, and drove. 2 hours of switchbacks and pine-thick air. The Tahoe cabin stood at the edge of the lake, shingles silvered, porch sagging but proud. I stepped inside. Dust motes spun in the angled light. On the mantel, another envelope. She'd left me breadcrumbs. The letter spoke of a trust she'd set up, signed only in my name. If the boy forgets his father's worth, she'd written, you'll still stand. My throat tightened. The place smelled of cedar and Layla's rose lotion. Her ghost moved in every corner. And yet, it wasn't grief filling me now. It was resolve. Back outside, the lake spread wide, dark as ink, ringed by peaks still capped in snow. My reflection stared back at me, a man not yet finished. I thought about Calvin's Instagram smile, Jessa's neat handwriting, the word paperwork pressed like a warning. I heard again the feeder tapping glass, her hidden message waking me from sleepwalking. My son thought he could circle me like a vulture, paperwork in hand, wife at his side, telling neighbors and judges that the old man was slipping. But I had Layla's voice in ink, a trust with my name carved into it, and a cabin no one could touch. I closed the cabin door behind me, key heavy in my pocket. Somewhere down the mountain, I'd have to face them, and when I did, they wouldn't see a confused old man. They'd see a soldier with new orders, because my wife had armed me from the grave, and God help anyone who tried to strip me bare now. I spent the week pretending nothing had changed, but the key burned a hole in my pocket, and the cabin in Tahoe filled my head like a drumbeat. Every time the mantel clock ticked, it was like Layla saying, "Don't you dare roll over, Bruce." On Thursday evening, Calvin showed up. No call first, just that lazy knock that used to mean Dad. Open up, I forgot my keys. I answered in my undershirt, made him wait a beat longer than usual. "Hey, Dad," he said, grinning too wide. "Thought I'd check in. See how you're managing." He glanced around like a realtor, eyes skating over my kitchen counters, my paperwork stacked neat on the table. He whistled low. "That's a lot of bills. Want me to help sort through them?" I let the silence stretch until he fidgeted. "I've been paying bills since before you were born, son." He laughed it off, but his eyes stayed sharp, calculating. "Jessa and we worry. It's a lot for one guy, especially at your age." There it was, the soft insult dressed as concern. I kept my face neutral, though inside my chest something snapped tight. Funny thing, Calvin, the older I get, the better I am at spotting when someone's circling. Before he could answer, I caught a shadow through the blinds. A black sedan idled across the street, engine humming low, windows tinted. My neighborhood's a kind where people drive pickups with bumper stickers, not silent government glass. "You expecting someone?" I asked. Calvin looked, then shrugged too fast. Probably just lost. But the car didn't move. We sat at the table. He talked about refinancing, simplifying assets, and the word guardianship slipped out like a coin from a torn pocket. He tried to snatch it back with nervous chatter, but I'd already heard. Layla's trust papers were locked in my safe, her words ringing like a church bell. Sometimes paperwork is a shield. I leaned across the table, lowered my voice. "Son, do you know what it feels like when your father looks you in the eye and sees a stranger?" That shut him up. For the first time in his life, Calvin didn't have a quick comeback. The clock ticked. The sedan purred. My son shifted in his seat. "I think you should go," I said. He hesitated, then forced a smile, slapped my shoulder like we just finished a ball game. "Sure, Dad. We'll talk again soon." When the door closed behind him, I watched from the window as he slid into the sedan. It pulled away slow, like it had nowhere urgent to be. That night, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon, sat at Layla's old roll top, and read her letters again. I traced her script with my thumb until my vision blurred. "They think you're weak," she seemed to whisper. "Show them you're not." The bourbon burned all the way down. The house creaked. Outside, the feeder tapped the glass again, steady and patient. I knew what was coming. A storm dressed up in legal briefs and affidavits. But storm forget, I've weathered wars, funerals, and winters colder than hell. And when morning came, I swore I'd be ready to meet them in their own arena, because they weren't after my money. They were after my dignity. And I don't surrender that. Not to my own blood. Not to anyone. Sunday morning came with that hollow church bell quiet, the kind that makes you hear your own bones. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming, Layla's photograph propped against a sugar bowl. Her smile was a compass needle pointing steady north, even now. Then the knock came, not the neighborly kind. Hard, rhythmic. I opened the door to a deputy with a manila envelope and the same rehearsed look I'd seen in the Army, when young recruits delivered bad orders. "Mr. Dalton?" I signed. He handed it over and left without a word. The envelope was thick, crisp with menace. Inside, a petition for guardianship. Calvin and Jess's names printed bold. Their claim? That I was no longer competent to manage financial or personal affairs. They wanted control of my accounts, my home, my choices. The mantle clock ticked. My ears rang. I could almost hear Layla's voice through the paper. "Paperwork is a shield, Bruce, but today it's their sword." I called Floyd first. He'd been my brother in arms since Saigon, the kind of man who still carried a Zippo engraved with our unit crest. "They think you're slipping?" he barked when I told him. "Hell, you're sharper than I am. We'll fight this." Then I called Kira, a lawyer I'd known from church. Sharp eyes, sharper mind. When I explained, she didn't sound surprised. "I've seen this before. Families circling assets like sharks. You've got proof you're capable? Bank records, medical checkups, witnesses." I thought of the safe upstairs. The trust papers, the clean bill of health from Dr. Ames last winter, the stack of neatly paid bills. "I've got more than proof," I said. "Good," she answered, "because they're coming hard. We'll hit harder." That evening, I drove to the cabin. The lake was black glass under a pink sky. Inside, I spread the papers across the table like battle maps. Layla's handwriting stared back. "If the boy forgets his father's worth, you'll still stand." I touched the wood grain of the table, rough under my palm, and swore aloud, "I'll stand, Layla, on my own feet." As the light faded, I heard gravel crunch outside. I killed the lamp, peered through the curtain. Same black sedan, idling at the bend. Watching, waiting. I grabbed the old hunting rifle from the rack. Didn't chamber a round. Didn't need to. Just set it on the table beside the trust documents. A reminder I was not prey. The sedan pulled off eventually, taillights glowing like coals. Back inside, I poured coffee into Layla's favorite mug, the one with a chipped rim from our last trip to Yosemite. I held it up, a toast to the shadows. "You want to call me incompetent?" I said into the quiet. "Come into the light and prove it." The feeder tapped against the cabin window, steady as a heartbeat. And in that sound, I knew the real fight hadn't started yet. But when it did, it would be public. And the first crack in their pretty little image was about to show. The courthouse smelled of varnish and old air, like every lie ever whispered between its walls had seeped into the wood. I walked through security slow, shoulders square, the brass key from Layla heavy in my pocket like a medal. Kira met me by the benches, a stack of folders in her arms. Her dark blazer looked like armor. "They file fast," she said. "Too fast. Someone's coaching them." "Coaching?" I asked. She nodded toward the hallway. There stood Calvin and Jessa, polished like a campaign poster. He wore a navy suit he couldn't afford without my name behind it, tie knotted too tight. Jessa clutched a leather binder, eyes scanning me as if I were inventory. "Dad," Calvin said, all charm. "You look good. I'm glad you made it." I didn't answer. Just let the silence hang until it soured. The judge's assistant called us in. We took our seats at long tables, facing forward. The room was quiet except for the shuffle of papers and the hum of the fluorescent lights. I could feel eyes on me, clerks, strangers, even a local reporter tapping notes. This was their stage. And they thought I was the fool playing the part of a doddering old man. Kira opened strong, citing my recent medical evaluations, the bank statements showing bills paid on time, the notarized letters from neighbors vouching for my independence. Then it was Calvin's turn. "Your Honor," he began, voice smooth, "my father has been struggling since my mother passed. Forgetfulness. Poor judgment. We're only trying to help him avoid financial ruin." The gall of it nearly choked me. But then came the moment I didn't expect. The first public crack. Jessa leaned too far into her binder, whispering lines she'd rehearsed, and the judge frowned. "Ma'am, are you his legal representative?" She flushed red. "No, Your Honor, but—" "Then let your husband speak." The gallery chuckled. Calvin shot her a glare sharp enough to cut glass. That was strike one, a public stumble in the theater they'd built. When court recessed for lunch, I walked past them without slowing. Calvin tried to keep his voice low, but I heard it clear. "You embarrassed us." They forgot something important. In war and in court, the crowd notices cracks. They don't heal. They spread. I ate lunch alone on a bench, ham sandwich from a brown bag, the same way I had in uniform 50 years ago. Nothing tastes more American than bread, meat, and the knowledge you've got one more fight in you. When I finished, I folded the wax paper into a neat square. My hands were steady. My mind sharper than it had been in months. Back inside, Kira leaned over and whispered, "They underestimated you today. That's good. Let them. We'll widen every fracture." I nodded, eyes fixed on the table where Calvin sat, whispering furiously at Jessa, his perfect smile cracking. The judge returned, gavel in hand. "Court will reconvene," he said. And I knew the storm had just begun, and the next strike would land harder. That night, I couldn't sleep. The tick of the mantel clock at home felt louder than artillery fire, every second announcing that my own son had dragged me into court. I poured black coffee at 2 a.m., sat at the table with Layla's photograph, and whispered, "You saw this coming, didn't you?" Her letter lay unfolded beside me, edges worn soft from my hands. Sometimes paperwork is a shield. She hadn't just left me a cabin. She left me a battle plan. The next morning, Kira called. "Bruce, we need ammunition. Proof of your competence. Hard evidence." I opened a safe and laid out what I had. Bank records with every check cleared, a statement from Dr. Ames confirming I was fit, neighbor testimonies. Still, it felt thin. I wanted more than paper. I wanted witnesses who'd stand tall. So I drove to Floyd's. He was sanding a rocking chair on his porch, sleeves rolled, arms still thick with the muscle of old campaigns. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Do I look incompetent to you?" He barked a laugh. "You look like the same stubborn mule I followed through jungle mud. If a judge needs convincing, I'll sit in that stand and swear it." One witness down. Then I visited Macy, the grocery clerk who'd watched me do math faster than her register for years. She agreed to write a statement. Even the pastor offered words about my sharpness when I volunteered at the veterans' shelter. Every piece mattered. Every voice added weight. That afternoon, I caught sight of the black sedan again, idling near the park where I walked. Windows dark, engine low. I stared at it until it rolled away, slow as a predator not ready to pounce. Inside me, something shifted. Fear turned to iron. They wanted to paint me as feeble, but I was gathering an army. Quietly, steadily. Kira called again. "We'll need to surprise them. Don't just defend, attack. Expose the cracks in their story." "Cracks?" I asked. She paused. Jess's pushiness. Calvin's money troubles. If they want guardianship, we'll show the court who really can't be trusted. I hung up and stood at the window. The feeder tapped against the glass, steady as a drum. Layla's handwriting burned in my mind. If they thought age was weakness, they'd learn what decades of patience and discipline can forge. Because I wasn't just building a defense. I was sharpening a blade. And the first cut would come soon, right where their pretty facade was weakest. The second hearing drew a bigger crowd. Word had spread, an old veteran dragged to court by his own son. Neighbors, church friends, even a few curious strangers filled the benches. It wasn't just a case anymore, it was theater. And I knew exactly how to use the stage. Kira stacked our folders like bricks before battle. "Remember," she whispered, "we don't just offend today. We draw blood." Calvin walked in late, tie crooked, Jessa glued to his side. He scanned the room, saw the packed gallery, and smirked like attention was applause. But I caught the twitch in his jaw. The kind of man gets when he knows the script might fall apart. The judge called order. Calvin took the stand first, speaking smooth as butter. "Your Honor, my father had become forgetful. He once left the stove on for hours. He misplaces important papers. Jessa, and I only want to protect him from harm." I let the lie hang. The gallery shifted. Some heads nodded. Then Kira rose. "Mr. Dalton, do you pay your own mortgage?" "Of course not," Calvin said, smiling. "Dad does, but—" "Show the court," Kira said, handing me a folder. I opened it steady, pulled out the bank statements. Each one stamped paid in full, every check cleared on time. The judge raised an eyebrow. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Then came Jessa's turn. She approached the witness table with a practiced pity smile. "Bruce often repeats stories," she said, her voice high and sweet. "Last month, he told the same joke 3 times at dinner." The gallery chuckled, but not kindly. Kira stepped forward. "Mrs. Dalton, how many times did your husband refinance his business last year?" Jessa blinked. "Excuse me?" "Answer the question." She hesitated, then whispered, 3. "And who bailed him out?" Kira asked, loud enough for the gallery to hear. Jessa flushed. "We had assistance." The judge leaned back, unimpressed. The gallery buzzed louder. Calvin shot Jessa, a look that could cut stone. That was strike 2, another crack in her facade, and this time it wasn't hidden. It was public, sharp, undeniable. When the recess bell rang, I stepped outside into the crisp air. Neighbors came up, clapping my shoulder, saying things like, "We're with you, Bruce, and you're not alone." For the first time since Layla's funeral, I felt the weight shift. Inside, Calvin hissed at Jessa, his perfect image unraveling in front of half the town. The same people he'd wanted to impress now whispered about their incompetence. The mantel clock in my memory ticked steady. The bird feeder at home would be rocking in the breeze. And Layla's voice rang clear as a trumpet. "Let the truth shine in public, Bruce. That's where lies can't breathe." I tightened my grip on the brass key in my pocket, because the next move wouldn't just defend my honor. It would turn their ambition into their humiliation. And the whole town would be watching when it landed. The third day of hearings felt like the longest march of my life. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, hot and merciless, while the gallery leaned in as if the whole town had bought front-row tickets to a family collapse. Kira whispered, "Today we bring in your witnesses. Today we turn the knife." Calvin looked ragged, though he tried to polish it up. His suit wrinkled, tie loose, eyes darting. Jessa clutched her binder like it was a life raft. I almost pitied them. Almost. Floyd was first. He strode to the stand in his denim jacket, chest out like he was still in uniform. I've known Bruce Dalton 50 years. We went through fire together. I'd trust him with my life. And I'll tell you this, he's sharper today than half the kids I see staring at their phones. The gallery laughed, heads nodding. Calvin shifted in his seat. Then came Macy, the grocery clerk. She spoke softly but clear. "Bruce does his math faster than my register. He's helped me balance the till more times than I can count. If that's incompetence, I wish more people had it." The judge smiled faintly. Even the stenographer paused, pen hovering. Finally, Dr. Ames. White coat, calm voice. Mr. Dalton is fully competent. No dementia, no cognitive decline. He's healthier than many men 10 years younger. By then, the air in the courtroom had shifted. The petition that once seemed plausible now smelled rotten. The gallery was murmuring, heads turning toward Calvin and Jessa. The stage lights had flipped, and they were the ones exposed. That's when it happened. The second public humiliation. During cross-examination, Kira pressed Jessa on finances. Mrs. Dalton, did you or did you not encourage your husband to file for guardianship to gain access to his father's trust? Jessa froze. I don't. Answer, please. Her face flushed crimson. We were only trying to secure our future. Gasps filled the room. Calvin buried his face in his hands. The judge slammed his gavel. Order. But the damage was done. They'd wanted me painted as unfit. Instead, it was their greed that had been nailed to the wall in front of neighbors, reporters, and half the congregation. Recess came. I walked out slow, each step measured, the way you walk away from a battlefield you've already claimed. Outside, veterans I hadn't seen in years waited on the steps, clapping my shoulder. Colonel Dalton, one said, "We've got your 6." I looked back through the courthouse doors. Calvin and Jessa sat alone, whispering furiously, their pretty picture frame cracked beyond repair. The mantel clock in my memory ticked steady. The feeder at home would be tapping glass in the evening breeze. And Layla's words carried me forward. Don't let them decide for you, Bruce. The crowd wasn't on their side anymore, and the final blow was still to come. By the time the fourth hearing rolled around, the gallery wasn't just full. It was packed, standing room only. Folks I hadn't spoken to in years came just to watch. It wasn't curiosity anymore. It was solidarity. Small-town America loves a redemption story, and they decided mine was worth rooting for. Kira leaned close as we walked in. Today we push for dismissal. If the judge bites, this whole circus ends. Calvin sat at the petitioner's table looking like he hadn't slept in a week. His jaw twitched, his tie was missing, and his shoes weren't shined. Jessa tried to sit tall, but every eye in the room burned her down. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Dalton, you may speak for yourself. I stood, brass key in my pocket, Layla's words in my chest. My voice didn't shake. Your Honor, I've been accused of being unfit, but I'm the one who pays my bills, maintains my home, drives 2 hours to a cabin my wife trusted me to protect. I don't need guardianship. What I need is for my family to remember honor. The room hushed. For a second, you could hear the hum of the exit sign. Then Kira stepped forward. We moved for dismissal based on lack of evidence, conflicting testimony, and clear financial motive on the part of the petitioners. The judge rubbed his chin. Do you have proof of motive? Kira nodded to me. I pulled out the trust documents, Layla's shield, and placed them on the table. The courtroom buzzed as she explained. A trust set up solely in Bruce Dalton's name, meant to protect his property. Petitioners gain nothing if this man remains independent. That is why they want guardianship, not for his health, for his assets. Calvin shot up, red-faced. That's not true. The judge barked, sit down. The gallery erupted in murmurs. A reporter scribbled furiously. And then, strike 3, the third public humiliation. Jessa panicked, stood and blurted, we had no choice. We're drowning in debt, and he's sitting on resources he doesn't even use. Gasps echoed. Calvin grabbed her arm, trying to pull her down, but the confession hung in the air like smoke. The judge banged his gavel. Order. His voice cut through the uproar. I will review all documents. Court is adjourned until tomorrow. Outside, people crowd around me, shaking my hand, calling me by name, offering support. Someone even shouted, "We're with you, Bruce." It felt like standing in uniform again, brothers in arms at my back. But as I walked to my truck, I spotted the black sedan across the street, engine idling. This time the window rolled down an inch, just enough for me to glimpse a pair of eyes watching, unblinking. I stopped, squared my shoulders, and stared back. My reflection stared in their glass, tall, steady, unbroken. The sedan pulled away, taillights glowing like coals. Tomorrow would decide it all. And I was ready to finish this war the way I'd fought every other. On my feet, with dignity and with the truth as my weapon. Morning broke with a hard light, the kind that doesn't let you hide. I shaved close, polished my boots, knotted a tie Layla once had made me look presidential. If they wanted to test my competence, they'd see it in every stitch. At the courthouse, the gallery was fuller than ever. Veterans, neighbors, reporters. The air buzzed like a football game before kickoff. Kira leaned in as we took our seats. This is the day, Bruce. We land the final blow. The judge entered, stern eyes sweeping the room. We'll hear closing arguments. Calvin went first. He stood, shoulders slumped but voice pitched to pity. Your Honor, my father's a good man, but grief has clouded his judgment. We just want to protect him. If we don't act now, he could lose everything. He sat down to silence. Not sympathy, silence. Then Kira rose. She didn't waste words. What you've witnessed here is not concern. It's greed. Mr. Dalton has shown clear competence. Medical proof, financial records, testimony from neighbors and doctors. Meanwhile, the petitioners have admitted debt, conflicting motives, and desperation. This case isn't about protection. It's about power. And today, that ends. The gallery stirred, nodding, whispering. The judge lifted the trust papers, flipping through them slow, deliberate. Mr. Dalton, he said, do you wish to add anything? I stood. Every eye turned. The brass key felt heavy in my pocket. Layla's voice steady in my ear. My wife saw the storm coming, I said. She left me a shield so no one could take what's mine. I'm not incompetent. I'm not lost. I'm a man who buried his partner and still stands. If that's weakness, then we've redefined strength. The judge's gavel cracked once. The petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, given the clear harassment, I am granting Mr. Dalton protective order. This matter is closed. The gallery erupted, applause, gasps, whispers of vindication. Calvin's face collapsed, red and hollow. Jessa stared at the floor, tears streaking the mask she wore so tight. Outside, the courthouse steps felt like a parade ground. Veterans saluted, neighbors clapped my back, reporters shouted questions. I answered none. But in the midst of the noise, I saw Calvin watching me from the curb. His lips moved around words I couldn't hear. He looked smaller than I remembered. The black sedan was gone. Just him, standing alone. I turned away, because the war in court was over. But wars don't end clean. They echo. And as I drove back toward the lake, the feeder at home would be tapping the glass again. A reminder, the fight was won. But the real legacy still waited to be built. The day after the verdict, the house was too quiet. No papers to prepare, no courthouse to march into, no gavel hanging over my head. Just the tick of the mantel clock and the faint tap of the feeder outside. Victory should have felt like champagne. Instead, it felt like ashes. I drove to the cabin, key heavy in my pocket. The road curved through pines dusted with spring snow, the lake flashing silver between the trees. When I opened the cabin door, the air smelled of cedar and dust, but beneath it lingered something sweeter. Layla's rose lotion, faint but stubborn, like memory itself. I spread the trust papers across the old table again, but this time I didn't see a shield. I saw a tool. Protection was good, but legacy was better. She hadn't left me this place to hide. She'd left it to build. I thought about the veterans who clapped me on the courthouse steps, men and women with eyes like mine, tired but unbroken. Some had nowhere to go, no families left, no roof steady above their heads. The cabin had 4 walls, heat, a kitchen, and beds. It could be more than refuge for me. It could be theirs. I stepped outside, boots crunching on gravel, and looked out at the lake. Wind rippled the surface, scattering reflections. I imagined kids running along the shore, wives setting tables inside, men like Floyd telling stories by the fire. Not a lonely retreat, but a sanctuary. That night I called Floyd. What would you say if I turned the cabin into a shelter for veterans and their families? He was quiet for a beat. Then, I'd say Layla would be damn proud. and I'd say I'll help you build it. I called Macy next. She offered to organize donations. The pastor said the church would spread the word. Piece by piece, an army of the willing began to form. Back in the cabin, I found one more envelope tucked into the desk drawer, brittle and yellowed. Layla's script again. Bruce, if you're strong enough to keep standing, be strong enough to lift others. That's how I want to be remembered. Her words hit me harder than the verdict ever could. Because this wasn't just about proving competence. It was about proving purpose. I folded the letter, slid it into my breast pocket, and stepped onto the porch. Across the dark water, the mountains loomed like sentinels. I whispered into the cold air, "You're still guiding me, Layla, and I'm still listening." The feeder tapped again at home in my mind. Tick of the clock, beat of my heart. The war with Calvin was done. But the real mission, our mission, had just begun. The first hammer swung at dawn. Floyd and I stood side by side. Sleeves rolled, tearing out the rotted porch boards of the Tahoe cabin. Every strike echoed through the pines like a promise. The place would not be a monument to secrecy anymore. It would breathe with life again. By noon, a handful of veterans had shown up. Word had spread faster than wildfire. Men with tool belts, women with casseroles. Even a couple of teenagers carrying buckets of nails. One of them saluted me, shy but proud. "Colonel Dalton, sir. My dad said you needed help." I shook his hand firm. "Not Colonel, just Bruce. And yeah, we got plenty to do." The cabin came alive that week. Sawdust in the air, hammers ringing, the smell of chili simmering in borrowed crock-pots. I walked through each room, watching old wounds turn into fresh walls. Where silence had hung heavy, laughter now spilled. But not everyone celebrated. On the third day, Calvin showed up. He parked his shiny car by the tree-line, arms crossed, watching us raise new siding. Jessa sat in the passenger seat, sunglasses hiding her eyes. He finally stepped out. "Dad, what is this?" I handed a hammer to the teenager and wiped my hands on a rag. "This is your mother's legacy. A place for veterans and their families. Safe ground." His jaw tightened. "You can't just—" I cut in. "The trust says it's mine, which means it's theirs too." "Behind me?" Floyd chuckled. "Looks like the young man's never swung a hammer." The gallery of volunteers laughed. Calvin flushed red. That was humiliation number 4. Not in the courtroom this time, but in the dirt and daylight, where his polished words didn't mean a damn thing. He stormed back to the car. Jessa whispered something sharp, and they peeled away, tires spitting gravel. But their shadow lingered, heavy as storm clouds. That night, I sat on the porch, the lake black and still, the smell of pine smoke in the air. Layla's last letter was folded in my pocket, words burning to the fabric. Be strong enough to lift others. Inside, veterans and their kids were unrolling sleeping bags, telling stories, passing hot cocoa. The walls of the cabin shook not from age, but from life. I leaned back in the old rocking chair Floyd had repaired, listening to the chorus inside and the tap of the feeder in my memory. For the first time in months, I wasn't just defending what was mine. I was building something bigger than myself. But I knew Calvin wasn't finished. And when he came back, it wouldn't be with words. It would be with something sharper. I tightened my grip on the armrests and stared into the dark. The war wasn't over. It was changing battlefields. A week later, the storm I'd been waiting for finally rolled in, not with thunder, but with a courier's knock. Again, same stiff envelope, same weight of betrayal. Only this time, the return address wasn't family. It was a law firm. Inside, a cease and desist. Calvin and Jessa claimed I was endangering property value by turning the cabin into what they called an unsanctioned boarding house. The words dripped with contempt, printed on glossy letterhead they couldn't afford without loans. Floyd read it over my shoulder and spat into the dirt. "Boarding house, my ass. It's a sanctuary." Kira called that night. Her voice was steady, steel wrapped in velvet. "Don't panic. They're bluffing. They can't touch the trust. They're trying to rattle you, make you slip." But I wasn't rattled. Not anymore. I'd seen the way the community rallied, the way the cabin pulsed with life. Veterans hauling firewood. Kids laughing by the lake. Widows finally sleeping through the night. This was real. This was stronger than paper. Still, I knew Calvin wouldn't stop until he had one last card to play. Sure enough, 2 days later, he showed up at the cabin again. No suit this time. Flannel shirt, jeans, like he wanted to pass for one of us. But the shine of his shoes gave him away. "Dad," he said, voice tight, "why are you doing this? You're throwing away everything you built for strangers." Strangers? I stepped closer. These men and women wore the same uniform I did. They bled for the same flag you sleep under. They aren't strangers. They're family. His jaw flexed. "You could have left something for me." I shook my head. "You wanted control, not family. There's a difference." Behind me, Floyd and a half-dozen veterans stood silent, arms crossed. Calvin's eyes flicked to them, then back to me. He wasn't just facing his father now. He was facing a wall of witnesses. And then came his breaking point. He raised his voice, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're nothing without Mom. She ran this family, not you. You were just her shadow." The words sliced deep, but not the way he intended, because I looked around and saw every ear catching his outburst, every face judging him. His image, his careful, polished mask, shattered right there in the open air. Floyd muttered, "That's low, son." The others nodded. The silence that followed was worse than any boo. Calvin realized too late what he'd done. His anger had stripped him bare, and the crowd saw him for what he was. I stood tall, heart pounding but voice steady. Layla gave me this cabin because she knew my strength. And today, everyone here saw yours. Or the lack of it. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a tug at his sleeve, her face pale as ash. They turned and left, gravel spitting under their tires. The veterans clapped my back, one after another. "You held the line, Bruce," someone said. But as I looked out over the lake, the water black under the evening sky, I knew this wasn't finished. Calvin had been humiliated again, and humiliation breeds desperation. The battle in court was over. The battle in public had turned against him, which meant the next move would be the most dangerous of all. The cabin glowed warm that night, lanterns in every window, laughter spilling across the porch. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the dark woods beyond the firelight were watching me. The black sedan hadn't shown in days, yet its ghost lingered at the edge of every shadow. Inside, Floyd poured coffee into chip mugs. "We've won, Bruce. Don't let the boys' tantrums rob you of that." I nodded, but my gut knew better. Humiliation isn't an ending, it's fuel. And Calvin was burning hot. Sure enough, the next morning the storm broke. I walked out to fetch firewood and found spray, paint slashed across the cabin side. "Thief." Red letters, dripping like blood. The veterans gathered, faces hard. One of the younger men clenched his fists. "We'll handle him." I raised a hand. "No, this is my fight. My name. My family." We scrubbed the walls clean, layer by layer, until only faint shadows of the word remained. But the scar was there, the kind that one remembers. That afternoon, Kira drove up. She walked the perimeter, lips pressed thin. Vandalism changes things. If they push again, we'll answer with criminal charges. You're not alone in this, Bruce. Her confidence steadied me. But when the sun dropped and the veterans' kids curled into sleeping bags, I sat on the porch, rifle across my lap, listening to the pines breathe. Around midnight, headlights cut through the trees. A car slowed on the gravel road, then stopped. The engine idled. My chest tightened. Floyd stepped out with me, hand on his old Zippo, wanting to run them off. I shook my head. Not yet. The car sat there, humming like a predator's breath. Then the window rolled down, and I heard Calvin's voice, sharp across the cold. "You think this is over, Dad? You think you can make a fool out of me in front of the whole town?" I didn't answer. Silence was sharper than any word. He revved the engine, spit gravel, and tore off into the dark. The smell of burned rubber hung heavy in the night air. Floyd muttered, "He's cornered. Cornered men do stupid things." I stared at the lake. black and endless, and thought of Layla's last letter. Be strong enough to lift others. I was lifting, but I'd also have to strike, once and for all, before Calvin's desperation turned lethal. The feeder back home would be tapping against the glass this very moment, steady as a heartbeat, a signal. The war wasn't just about property anymore. It was about honor, about legacy, about the line a father draws where his own blood turns enemy. And the next move would decide everything, whether Calvin destroyed himself or whether I finished what Layla started. Either way, the final reckoning was already on its way. Dawn cracked cold and blue over the lake. I brewed coffee thick enough to float a nail and sat on the porch steps, the rifle leaning against the rail. The cabin behind me hummed with life. Kids stirring, veterans swapping stories. But my mind was on one man, my son. By mid-morning, the sheriff's cruiser rolled up. Deputy Morgan stepped out, hat low. "Mr. Dalton, we had a report of harassment last night. You want to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He studied me, then the cabin. "Word is you got a good thing going here. Don't let family ruin it." After he left, Floyd joined me. "You've been holding back, Bruce. Time to end it clean." He was right. This war had dragged long enough. And tonight, I'd draw the line where Calvin couldn't cross it without losing everything. I drove back to town that afternoon, wore my best suit, the one Layla picked years ago. At the bank, I met with the branch manager. We signed papers transferring the cabin's trust into a nonprofit foundation, the Layla Dalton Sanctuary for Veterans. Irrevocable, permanent. Not even my son's slickest lawyer could unwind it. The ink was barely dry when Calvin stormed into the lobby. His face was pale, eyes wild. "What did you do?" I slid him a copy of the document. "I honored your mother." He scanned the page, color draining from him. "You can't." "I can, and I did. This cabin isn't mine to fight over anymore. It belongs to those who need it." The bank lobby was crowded, tellers, customers, even the manager's secretary. They all heard. They all saw. Calvin's voice cracked as he sputtered. "You've destroyed our future." I leaned in, quiet but sharp. "No, son, I've saved mine. You destroyed your own." The room went still. His shoulders slumped, his jaw clenched, and he knew the battle was lost. Publicly, irrevocably. He staggered out, Jessa chasing after him, whispering furiously. I stayed behind, shaking hands with the manager, who said, "You did the right thing, Bruce. Folks will remember this." Driving back up the mountain, I felt the weight lift. Not victory, not yet, but the end game had finally been set. The cabin was untouchable, Layla's legacy secured. When I reached the porch, the veterans greeted me with cheers. Kids waved from the window. Floyd handed me a mug of coffee. "Done?" he asked. I nodded. Done. But as the sun set and the feeder tapped against the glass of my memory, I knew one final chapter remained. Calvin wouldn't walk away quietly. His pride wouldn't let him. The reckoning would come. And when it did, I'd be ready with truth, with dignity, with Layla's shield in my hands. Tomorrow, the last battle. The catharsis. The moment that would decide whether my family's story ended in ruin or in honor. 71 years taught me one last lesson. I whispered to the cabin walls as dawn lit the lake. The cleanest revenge isn't fire or fists, it's legacy. By noon, the porch was crowded. Veterans in uniform jackets, kids clutching paper flags, neighbors bringing pies. The dedication ceremony for the Layla Dalton Sanctuary had drawn half the town. Reporters set up tripods, microphones bristled. The brass plaque gleamed in the sun, a refuge for those who served. Established 2024. I stood at the front steps, tie straight, boots polished. Floyd at my shoulder, Kira on the other side. Behind me, the cabin glowed warm with new paint, laughter spilling through open windows. And then Calvin appeared. He hadn't been invited, but pride drags a man where shame should have kept him away. He pushed through the crowd, face pale, eyes darting at the cameras. Jessa trailed behind, sunglasses hiding fresh tears. "Dad," he said, voice shaking but loud enough for the mics, "you've humiliated me." This circus ruins our family's name. I let the silence grow, the crowd watching. Finally, I stepped forward, brass key in my hand, the very one Layla had hidden all those months ago. I held it up for everyone to see. This key, I said, voice steady, wasn't left for control. It was left for trust. My wife believed I would use it to protect what mattered. Not money, not pride, legacy. Today, this key no longer opens just my cabin. It opens a sanctuary for every man and woman who wore this nation's uniform. Applause swelled, echoing off the mountains. Calvin's face flushed crimson. He tried to speak, but the crowd drowned him out. Neighbors who once nodded politely now shaking their heads, veterans glaring with steel in their eyes. And then came the final cut, clean and public. The mayor himself stepped onto the porch, clapped my shoulder, and said into the microphone, "Bruce Dalton, this town thanks you. Your wife will be proud." The cameras flashed. Calvin's humiliation was complete, carved into history. His voice cracked as he muttered, "You chose him over me." I met his eyes. "No, son, I chose honor. You could have too." He turned, shoulders slumped, swallowed by the crowd that no longer looked at him with respect but with pity. Jessa followed, her silence louder than any defense. The ceremony ended with a flag raised over the porch. Children's voices sang, rough but earnest. The lake shimmered, the plaque caught the light, and for the first time since Layla's passing, my chest felt full, not with grief, but with purpose. As dusk fell, I sat alone at the water's edge, the key resting in my palm. The feeder back home tapped in my memory, steady as a heartbeat. The mantle clock ticked in rhythm. I whispered into wind, "Layla, I kept the promise. They didn't take my name. They didn't take your legacy." The lake held my reflection, an old soldier, upright, unbroken, with nothing left to prove. And in that stillness, revenge turned to peace. The war was finished, and I had won it by standing tall, not striking low. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the right.